Good afternoon, everyone. Our School Innovation and Turnaround Committee is now called to order. Roll call, please.
Dr. Oates, I guess she's present. Mr. Catskill?
Here.
Mr. Catskill is present. Dr. Davis?
Here.
Dr. Davis is present. Ms. Ellis?
Here.
Ms. Ellis is present. Mr. Garvey?
Here.
Mr. Garvey is present. Ms. Holloway?
Here.
Ms. Holloway is present. Mr. Morris?
Here.
Mr. Morris is present. Ms. Orange Jones?
Present.
Ms. Orange Jones is present. Mr. Rock?
Present.
Mr. Rock is present. Ms. Bochier? Ms. Bochier is not present. Dr. Weaver?
Present.
Dr. Weaver is present. We have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. Our first item on the agenda, please. Or next item, rather.
The first item on the agenda is on page 1, item 2.1, consideration of a material amendment to the Type 2 charter contract governing Lafayette Renaissance Charter Academy. The department recommendation is to approve the material amendment to the Type 2 charter contract submitted by Lafayette Charter Foundation, Inc. to add a second location of LRCA at 1212 East Ponte-Mouton Road, Lafayette, Louisiana, 70507, to provide facilities to serve expanded grade levels in student enrollment, beginning with the 2021-2022 school year. So moved.
There's been a motion by President Holloway and a second by Mr. Garvey. I understand that is there a presentation from the department or comments?
Just a quick update. As you all may remember, in December, we had Lafayette Redesign Charter Foundation. You all actually approved material amendment to their contract to operate and to add grade levels 9 through 12 to the current grade level configuration and increase their enrollment beginning with the 21-22 school year, contingent upon their board attending a governance training. They completed that training on January 28th and met the requirements of that. And so moving forward, they are now submitting their material amendment for a change in location that you received in your packet.
Great, thank you. All right, any comments or questions from the board? Dr. Davis.
Do we know if their plan is to ultimately end up on a single campus?
Dr. Davis, we do have representatives from the Lafayette Charter Foundation here today who can speak to that. One of the things I would reiterate was just simply what Dr. Peterson shared. Our initial recommendation to approve the material amendment around the increase in enrollment and expansion of grade levels was based on looking at comparative schools in that particular area and feeling like thinking through those families' options and choices and believing that those students would be better served in terms of the family's ability to choose from having the quality of school there that was being provided by Lafayette Charter Foundation as opposed to some lower ranked high schools in that region. And so now this particular item simply is, I believe, to be the final part of that material amendment request, which has to do with the additional location to serve those students. And I'm going to ask Mr. McCoffin, who's the board attorney, to speak to this because we are going to use part of the space and then make a switch in terms of which students occupy which building.
Good afternoon. My name is Gary McCoffin. I represent the
Is your microphone on, sir?
Sorry, I saw the green V, but I thought it was lit. Gary McCoffin, attorney for Lafayette Charter Foundation. Our existing school is located in Current Farms, which is a subdivision north of Lafayette, west of I-49, south of Ponte-Mouton Road. The interim facility that we're looking at, and we have entered into a lease agreement with the city of Lafayette, would be for our first year of operation. It would be about 120 to 150 students. It's in a recreation center, provides great facilities for us. The permanent site has not been acquired because we have to, number one, make sure that we can get the charter before we can justify the acquisition. We do have a site in mind. It is in the same development. Unfortunately, our existing school is landlocked. It's 6.5 acres approximately, and the rest of the subdivision has built up around it. So there is additional acreage. We're looking at a 20-acre site to the eastern side of the subdivision. It would be again south of Ponte-Mouton Road, west of I-49. It would be entered from the Acadian Hills Lane, which would be a separate entrance, separate from the school that we have now, is within far less than a mile, I think a half a mile from our existing campus. So it will be convenient to our families to be able to have students on both. But that's what we're doing, and that's why we're staging it, where this coming school year, we will be 2 miles away on the same road, on the Rouge Road, in the recreation center, and then we can consolidate back to Corinth Farms the following year.
Okay, so ultimately your goal is to get all of your students on one single campus?
No, ma'am.
No, so you're still planning to?
They're not contiguous. They're in the same development, but they're not contiguous pieces of property because there's none available. The housing has grown up around our existing school, so we kind of got a leapfrog over that.
So did we at one point though, did your school try to come to BESE or to DOE regarding opening an additional school?
We have 2 schools in Lafayette. Actually, we think of it as 4 schools. In the Youngsville area, we have K through 8. We started with K through 8. It is now 6 through 9 or 6 through 10. We're constructing an additional high school facility, so we will be K through 12 in the Youngsville area shortly, the same areas that we operate the Larka facility.
I guess my question, and this is maybe, I don't know who would be able to clarify this one for me, is that at one point there was discussion of a Charter School USA opening a new school, and that that was advised against that, either DOE, I don't remember BESE voting on it while I've been on the board. And so when we came in, we had the material amendment, it was for adding children to their existing school. And so, but now they're going to be opening essentially a second site. And I guess I'm curious as to whether or not this is essentially allowing them to do what they wanted to do in the first place that we said no to.
Thanks, Dr. Davis. I'll just briefly respond to that. There was a request that went through our third-party evaluation process for a separate school. It was not connected to this particular school. That request did not ultimately move to the board for approval. What did, however, is the material amendment with this particular school that allowed for the increase in enrollment and expansion of the grade level. And I made that recommendation in looking at the other high schools in that particular area. One other thing that I think is important just to note for clarity for everyone is that Charter School USA is the provider for Lafayette Charter Foundation. So we actually would be contracting with Lafayette Charter Foundation. Lafayette Charter Foundation then works with Charter School USA to manage and operate their school. So you are correct. There was a different school that was under consideration that did not get to the point for approval. But what did get to the point of approval is expansion of the grades, expansion of enrollment, and then today consideration of their location. I think what Mr. McAuliffe is sharing is that their ability to have all of the students in one particular building is not possible because of the amount of space in that particular area. So they are just going to be one school. They're just going to be, some of the students will be in one location and the other will be in a different location nearby each other.
And let me give you a little more information. The application that I think you're talking about was our Scott application. Scott is a small community kind of to the northwest of Lafayette. That's 5 miles, I believe, from the Larka campus we're talking about. That would have been a new K through 8 campus to serve that community. What we're talking about is going back to the original plan for Larka, Lafayette Renaissance Charter Academy, which originally was going to be a K through 8, and then we had Arca, which is in the south part of the parish. We were going to have a single high school to serve both campuses. We realized from logistics, particularly traffic, we cannot do that. So we split it up, and instead of having a 1,200 student consolidated high school centrally located, we've expanded 600 seats in Youngsville for the Arca campus, and we're looking at 600 seats, I think, approximately, for the Larka campus. So Larka, Lafayette Renaissance, would be a K through 12 school separate from the Scott application, which we may bring back to you next year. Those would be entirely different developments, entirely different schools.
And And so my next question is, and I don't know who's best served or situated to answer this one, relates to finances, because in the documents that the board received, as I went through the minutes where their board authorized BESE to look at this material amendment, I noticed that they didn't consider their financial statement basically was supposed to be presented at that meeting, and then it was moved. And so that made me go to look at their budgets, just because I think one of the things that we're responsible for is making sure that these schools are financially viable. And so their balance is less than $120,000. And so my question is that a healthy fund balance for a charter school? And are they going to be able, I don't know what their lease looks like, but are they going to be able to afford this new lease? What is DOE's determination on that? And then if we're wrong, what happens when charter schools get into financial trouble? Do we have a fund through DOE where we can bail them out of that if they go below our 70% mark, say for instruction, because their finances have gotten to the point where they have to move money from instruction to their lease agreement? And I'm asking out of ignorance because I don't know the answer to that second question.
No, I mean, I think the first part is just, we too, and as indicated by our evaluations and rubric that looks into those, we did have some financial issues that we wanted to work through with that particular board. And that was part of the training that we requested that board go through with us as a department. That training happened. We had, in consideration of this particular request, we requested that the board, again, not CUSA, but the board, go through an additional training with us so we could outline any specific concerns we had relative to finances. That training was again completed. We have been able to, or intend to, follow up in writing to the board with those specific concerns.
So let me speak to that as well, if you like. The information that you have is a little bit dated. As of the school year after that, we had a 6.5% fund balance for LARCA. I believe we're at 7% now, or 7.5% with the closing of the school year. We did a 5-year projection going forward with the combined facilities and also breaking out the new facility. We've had, as Dr. Brumley said, we had governance training and Dr. Peterson conducted it for us in January. We completed that. We had 3 additional discussions. The most recent was yesterday morning, again, to review the finances and to answer the questions that you have on that. We're confident in where we are with the projections. We're comfortable with the lease arrangement. It is similar to each of the 4 schools. We have 2 campuses we consider. We have 3 leases on the Knoxville campus. And so the way we finance our facilities is by contracting with yet a third party. Charter Schools USA is our education service provider. We contract with Red Apple, who has been the developer and actually owns the facilities. We have a lease with Red Apple. It's been working well. Each of the 4 components that we've designed and opened at this point. They are the owner. We have a lease agreement with them. It's a non-recourse lease against us. So if there would be a financial problem, we're not bound to them to the detriment of our education services. And we've been very conscious of that. I believe when we had our meeting yesterday, the department's CFO, Beth, Sino, is that how we pronounce her name? Sat in on that meeting with us. We went through the entire arrangement, and our understanding of the conclusion of that discussion was that she understood the arrangement and was comfortable with it.
Okay, so one more question just related to what I asked about. Is there a mechanism by which charter schools that are struggling financially are provided help by the Department of Education budget? So I understand that we can provide counseling and best practices and fiscal management, but do we have a kind of a bailout fund? Does anybody know the answer to that question? We do not. We do.
I think the legislature,
So there is so I guess just I'm concerned about authorizing the material amendment on a charter school that might be struggling and that later is going to have to be helped out by additional taxpayer dollars. And that's all. I think I've asked enough questions on that. If anyone else has.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Other questions? Comments?
Yes. I just wanted some clarity on the wording of Dr. Brumley on the summary of recommendations, just to make sure I'm understanding that Renaissance is utilizing Tony Mouton's building, the rec center, for 1 year.
Yes,
Am I
ma'am.
understanding that correctly? And the following year, which is an interim stage, correct?
Yes,
It's like
ma'am.
a phase that you're in.
Yes, ma'am.
The following year, you are going back to
We're going to build a new facility.
a new facility.
It will be located in Correct Farms, but it will not be contiguous with our existing campus.
Okay,
All right?
I get
And we're
that.
comfortable with the timeline for each of the schools that we've built so far, including our two first schools back in 2014 when we opened them. We have a similar opportunity with the developer, with what facilities are in place and infrastructure,
Yeah.
to where in those two schools, we actually acquired the property and constructed the schools. We acquired the property in January, opened them in August. We would like to have a little more time on this one, and that's why we're asking on the material amendment, which was submitted, that we get approved for the interim site for this coming 2021-2022 school year at 1212 Baton Road. And then we would like approval for the secondary site, which we talked to Mr. Castillo, which would be 20 acres located in Correct Farms, south of West Palms and Mouton Road, west of I-49, fronting on Acadian Hills Lane. There's no address assigned to that property yet, and driveway cuts and all that sort of thing have not been constructed yet, so I can't give you a specific address, but we do have a specific location in mind. If that location would fall through, if it would prove to not be either economically feasible or we cannot acquire it, then we're ready to come back to you with an alternative site in an alternative or a subsequent material amendment. But to be able to allow us to move forward to negotiate on the site which we have identified and which we believe fills our needs, our material amendment requests two phases. One, approval for the interim facility at 1212 East Palm and Mouton Road. And then the second, phase 2, would be the permanent facility. And again, I'll describe it as in Correct Farms, south of West Palm and Mouton Road, west of I-49, fronting on Acadian Hills Lane.
Well, that's my question. Is the language in the summary of the recommendation sufficing what he's saying?
The material amendment that is provided is consistent to what Mr. McCauley shared.
I think what President Holloway is getting at is that on the executive summary that appears on page 1 at the bottom, the recommendation is to approve specifically the site at 1212 East Palm de Mouton Road, which is the interim location.
Correct.
It does not address the
And what
permanent site that Mr. McGoffin is addressing.
And that's what we're asking is to amend that to where it improves our application, our material amendment, but it's not clear in the
It's
recommendation.
not, because you would have to come back each time.
Correct. So what we're asking is we've identified a target site. If we could, and that site is as close as we can get to our existing campus and fulfills our needs. If we could get presumptive approval or approval of our material amendment as written, that takes care of our needs. And if we would have to identify and require a different site to the one that we just discussed, then we would anticipate having to come back for another material amendment.
Yeah, and just for clarification, on page 2 at the bottom, you will note that the reference to the amendment, the request specifically says interim and permanent, but that doesn't necessarily match up with
That's
the
correct.
recommendation.
That's right.
And that was because, as I understand it, that Charter School USA did not have a specific address, and therefore we couldn't include an address. So we've asked for additional clarification on the location, which is what Mr. McGoffin is attempting to do, to identify the location, given that there is no municipal address or it's undeveloped property.
And that request is coming from Lafayette Charter Foundation rather than Charter Schools USA.
Right.
And I'd like to conclude with this, that I do commend the expansion of 9th through 12th. This is the area I was raised in, so I'm very familiar with that location. And it's near the high school. That is a lower performing high school. And so you're going to be servicing children that want to be successful, want a good quality school. So I am depending on this expansion to serve the children of that area as every parent, every child would want. So thank you for that.
So just to maybe bring to a head what is being requested so that whatever we approve, there's clarity around it. What you are requesting is that there be a motion to approve the interim site, which is described in the motion, and the described permanent site, as you just described it, and provided a map or a picture of what that location is, because there isn't an actual address. That is the requested motion, which will require an amendment to what was moved, and that it specifically gives the address, but it doesn't say and describe permanent location. I'm not offering that motion, but just offering that perhaps for clarification.
I think you said it well. To amend, Shane, if you want to help us with the word.
Are y'all recommending approving?
They're recommending.
We don't have an address for the school year?
That's right.
Okay, so what school year would that be for?
2022 to 20 onward.
Shan, I think what President Holloway is asking is the language with regard to should this be an amendment? Could you send us some instructions on amendments versus substitute motions?
Yeah, I would say amend the motion.
Okay. All right, so President Holloway, can you make a motion? Or is Mr. Garvey, I'm sorry?
Whichever you prefer.
Oh, I thought you had a question.
No, I was going
Go
to
for it.
follow you. I propose that we amend the motion here to include this additional site that is proposed that doesn't have a municipal address, but is
Has been
how we
appropriately
describe.
I can provide that language if you'd like.
Could you,
It would be a 20-acre
in
tract.
line with the language that's going to be provided by the board president, describing the general area of the school and describing it as being close enough to the existing school, pulled from the same high school that Ms. Holloway was talking about, the same local program high schools.
Yeah, it's north side, Canterbury.
Correct.
Yes. Absolutely.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? It's been seconded by President Holloway. All right. But there are some comment cards, so I want to make sure I get to all of that and any additional discussion.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm Arlene.
Orange Jones.
Sorry about that. I actually do have questions. I'm curious, is there a precedent for this? I really can't remember. I know I've been here a long time, but I cannot remember. Like, if we were to look backwards at examples when we actually approved a building that didn't have a site yet, when can someone tell me when we've done that in the past related to?
Yeah, I would suggest that this building does have a site, it just doesn't have a municipal address. And they can identify the piece of property down to the which it meets and bounds, the phrase that attorneys use in describing the piece of property. It can be identified specifically. It just doesn't have a municipal address.
Well, to be clear on that, I don't want there to be any misunderstanding. We have not staked out a 20-acre tract. We know 20 acres is available from the developer who we have worked for at our fire school, and we're going to work with them as to where the best fit is for that 20-acre tract within the parameters I described, which would be south of West Pontoon Road, west of I-49, fronting on Acadian Hills Lane. That's the specifics I can give at this point.
But the developer, he has a specific, what is it, 60, 80, 100 acre piece of property, and you just have settled on which 20 acres of that piece of property?
Correct. They got a
But the
city-
60, 80, 100 acre piece of property can be described by meets and bounds again, at the surveyor's term, to lock in exactly which large tract you are going to be within.
Can I just add a little something? It's a 20-acre tract, so Mr. Garvey's asking a little bit more broadly, but I believe it's been identified in correspondence with the department as a 20-acre tract. I just don't want to broaden what the request is. Is that right, Mr. Clement? Any additional questions, comments before I go to comment cards from the board? All right, I have Dr. Mary Luella Riggs Cook, who supports the recommendation and wishes to speak, but she waives. Dr. Lonnie Luce supports the recommendation and he waives. Kim Balthasar supports the recommendation with amendment, does not wish to speak. Sarah Vandergriff supports the recommendation, does not wish to speak. Are there any other comment cards on this particular item? Any other questions or comments from the board? There has been a, Dr. Bowman?
I'd just like to recuse myself from the vote when it comes time to vote.
All right. That being said, there's been a motion to amend the original motion. That motion is now on the floor. Is there any objection to that motion? Seeing no objection, the motion passes. Thank you. That then takes us to the next item on the agenda. What is the next item?
The next item is on page 9, item 3.1, consideration of an update report regarding the return of Type 5 charter schools to the East Baton Rouge Parish School System. The department recommendation is to receive the report.
All right, is there a motion? It's a motion by Mr. Rock, seconded by Mr. Garvey. Dr. Peterson?
Prior to Dr. Peterson, I just want to share these particular schools have essentially been a part of RSD, and correct me, Dr. Peterson, where I make a mistake, but for roughly 13 years. And there has been considerable effort over the last few years to think about ways in which we could ensure that these schools are successful for the students in which they serve. And we have over the last year worked to try and move this to a point of resolution. In that period of time, we actually began work with one EDR superintendent who has since left the system and now have begun work again with the new system superintendent in EDR, and working with EDR, but also working along the charter leaders who care so very deeply about their schools and their students. And one of the things that we have come to learn through this process is that there are some things believed to be in question around things that are negotiable versus things that aren't negotiable, things that are in law versus things that aren't in law. And so one of the things that we are hoping to accomplish here today is to allow Dr. Peterson the opportunity, who has worked tirelessly on this over the last year, to present information about this particular process, give you a status report of where we are, and lean into some of our particular hopes on how we might ultimately come to a resolution in this particular agenda item that is in the best interest of certainly East Baton Rouge Parish School System, but these charter partners, but also, and most importantly, the students in which they serve. And we look forward to providing this presentation to you today, answering any questions that you may have, and hopefully moving this a little bit further down the field, so to speak. So Dr. Peterson, thank you for your effort. We look forward to the presentation.
you. So as Dr. Brumley mentioned, we'll start out with just the relevant and reference Louisiana statute. While we do have BESE bulletin that promulgates this, we want to really focus in on what the actual statute states. So throughout the presentation, we'll reference specific statute. The Recovery School District was created in 2003 by Louisiana legislators for the purpose of turning around the lowest performing schools in the state. When we think about, as Dr. Brumley mentioned, the jurisdiction of the RSD schools, the RSD shall retain jurisdiction of any of the schools placed within it for not less than 5 years. As you can see here, this is specific to our Type 5 charter schools that are located in EPR. We have Redesigned Dalton Charter School, Redesigned Lanier Charter School, Redesigned Glen Oaks Middle School, Democracy Prep, Baton Rouge, and Hillworth Science and Technology Charter School. Just to clarify, here we have Democracy Prep, Baton Rouge. As you can see, there's a star there that originally began in RSD jurisdiction as Prescott Middle School. Also to highlight, Glen Oaks began jurisdiction with the RSD as a direct run in 2008-2009. Then in 2014, it was chartered by Baton Rouge University Prep, and then in 2019, it was then transitioned and chartered by Redesign. No later than 9 months prior to the expiration of that 5-year period, the RSD shall make a report to BESE. So according to that timeline, that report shall be made no later than September 30th. Additionally, what should be included in that report, as we are going over today, at the minimum, the status of each school, its faculty and administration, the demographics, organizational management structure, along with whether there's been academic improvement or not. Additionally, a recommendation as to whether it should continue in the Recovery School District, continue in the Recovery District School District with a change in its operational status, closed, or what we seek to do is return to the administration and management of the transferring system, the proposed stipulations and conditions for return. Again, highlighting this is an authority that BESE does have. That this should happen no later than 6 months prior to the expiration of the 5-year period. Just wanting to highlight, although we have those dates, we do want to make sure that we are bringing this to you for consideration, to hear the status update, and to ask questions, because what we do know is really important for our schools and the continued operation in light of the pandemic, and even outside of that, to be able to forward plan and know the status and where they're going and who they'll be authorized by. The Recovery School District RSD Type 5 Charter Portfolio, again, with Democracy Prep Baton Rouge, we have Hillworth Science and Technology Charter School, Redesigned Dalton Charter School, Redesigned Glen Oaks Middle School, and Redesigned Lanier. I will take this moment to acknowledge that we also do have our representation for each of these schools in the audience. So now we'll go into the status updates for each of the schools. We will start with Democracy Prep, Baton Rouge. The mission of Democracy Prep is to educate responsible citizen scholars for success in the college of their choice and a life of active citizenship. A simple philosophy guides Democracy Prep staff, scholars, and alumni alike. Work hard, go to college, change the world. They serve grades K through 8. Their student enrollment is 526 students. Economically disadvantaged percentage is 100%. Students with disabilities is 16%, and limited English proficiency is 1.33%. They have 31 teachers, and total number of teachers, staff, and leadership are 45. The academic performance of the school is stated above. The school academic performance explanation, we wanted to make sure that we also are able to provide voice to our school leaders and allow them to submit this information. So I will read this as these are coming from the school leaders themselves. Democracy Prep Baton Rouge achieved a progress score of a B as issued by the Louisiana Department of Education for the past 2 years. Democracy Prep was successful in increasing the school's performance score from a low F as Prescott Middle School. In 2016, our school suffered a major disruption as a result of the Baton Rouge flood. Starting in 2018 and continuing into 2019, we made significant further investments into year-round curriculum and stronger teacher development. During the 1920 academic year, we would have seen significant growth in our SPF if students would have taken the LEAP 2025 assessment. The organizational performance, most recently for 1920, they are meets most expectations. The financial performance, most recently, meets most expectations. Next, we have Hillworth Science and Technology Charter School. Their mission, Hillworth Science and Technology Charter School, creates a safe, healthy, and student-centered learning environment that cultivates the knowledge and skills necessary for academic excellence, STEM careers, and character development, serving grades 6 through 8. Their current student enrollment is 389. Their economically disadvantaged percentage is 92.03%. Students with disabilities, 11.8%, and limited English proficiency, 13.62%. They currently have 30 teachers, and a total number of teachers, staff, and leadership is 15. The school academic performance explanation for Kenilworth. Kenilworth achieved a progress score of a B as issued by the Louisiana Department of Education for the past 2 years. The Pelican Educational Foundation was successful in increasing the school's performance score from a low F in 2009 to a C in 2013. At that time, LDOE changed the state school accountability system and shifted to a new model. In 2018, Kenilworth's middle school scored a 68.7, a C when calculated under the former accountability system, and a 59.0, a D under the new system. Under the new accountability system, Kenilworth's performance score remained just shy of a C letter grade. School performance scores were not calculated for 2020. Kenilworth's most recent assessment data and school performance score from 2019 demonstrate that Kenilworth is performing better than other comparable middle schools in Louisiana, with comparable schools defined as open enrollment middle schools that serve populations that are at least 90% economically disadvantaged and 80% African American. Their organizational performance for most recently for 2019-2020 is meets all expectations. For financial performance for 2019-2020 meets most expectations. Next is Redesigned Dalton Charter School. With the mission of Redesigned Schools Louisiana is to provide equity in public education for all students and families. Grade serves is pre-K through 5. Currently serving 246 students. Economically disadvantaged percentage is 98.37. Students with disabilities, 17.5%, and limited English proficiency, 0.41%. They have a total of 13 teachers and 25 total number of teachers, staff, and leadership. Their school academic performance explanation. Dalton has consistently been an A or a B in student progress over the years. Due to an Attorney General's opinion that was released, RSL was asked to reconfigure back to serving students only from K-5 versus the K-8 during the 18-19 academic year. We complied with the request. The shift to serving only K-5 students during the 18-19 academic year did play a role in our academic performance, as students who are now on grade level tend to reach grade level expectations the longer they are with our academic program. During the 19-20 academic year, we worked closely with our Tier 1 vendor instructional partners and LDOE in order to ensure that consistent monitoring and evaluative feedback was provided. Indicators tracked by instruction partners show that Dalton would have made a large positive performance jump due to high-quality instruction occurring with Tier 1 curriculum during the 19-20 academic year. With ESSER funds, we will be targeting literacy and hiring one literacy acceleration coach per grade level to address further academic gaps created by the pandemic. We will work to continue with Tier 1 vendors and LDOE to increase student achievement at Dalton. The most recent organizational performance rating for 2019-2020 is meets most expectations. And for financial performance for 2019-2020 meets all expectations. Next, we have Redesigned Oates Middle School, whose mission is the same, being that they are all within Redesign. Grades 6 through 8 serve. Current student enrollment is 242. Economically disadvantaged is 98.35%. Students with disabilities, 18.6%. And limited English proficiency is 1.24%. The total of 11 teachers and total number of teachers, staff, and leadership is 23. A note on their academic performance, Redesigned Schools Louisiana began operation of Glen Oaks Middle School July 1, 2019, and due to the impacts of COVID-19, no academic accountability data is available. Your organizational performance, this meets all expectations for the 19-20 year. And for their financial performance, meets all expectations as well. Redesigned Linear Charter School, again, the mission is consistent, and grade served is pre-K through 5. Currently have 268 students enrolled. Economically disadvantaged is 95.9%. Students with disabilities, 11.2%. And limited English proficiency is 4.48%. There are 14 teachers, and the total number of teachers, staff, and leadership is 26. Their school academic performance explanation. Linear has consistently earned over 100 points in the Progress Index since the implementation of Progress Points. Linear has been awarded by LDOE the honor of being an outstanding school during the 2017-2018 and 2018-2019 due to their academic performance. As well, Linear has been rated a top gain school by LDOE due to the performance from 2016 through 2019. During 2018-2019, Linear was also asked to comply to the Attorney General's opinion and convert from serving K-8 students to serving K-5 students only. Such shift did impact Linear's performance as Linear was on a trajectory to reach a peak in overall performance. Linear was able to move from the label CIR to UIN due to academic performance. Linear will continue to implement Tier 1 curriculum and best practices obtained from LDOE and Tier 1 vendors. Linear will also continue to work closely with LDOE in order to ensure academic success continues. Most recently, for organizational performance, meets most expectations. And for the financial performance for 2019-2020, it also meets all expectations. The next slide is to display an academic regression analysis of the Type 5 schools in EBR and the EBR pairs elementary and middle schools, but not including admission or selective admission or magnet schools. The academic regression analysis is used to estimate a relationship, and the variables here are economically disadvantaged students and school performance scores. What we know is education research has found that academic performance of students can be predicted by their socioeconomic status. Students with higher parental socioeconomic status demonstrate increased academic performance when compared to those with lower socioeconomic status. I'd be remiss to say, however, we know that as educators, we want to make sure that this always be pushed status. On the next slide, you will visually just see the impacts and to what extent socioeconomic status has on academic performance. If you notice a dot on the line, these dots are representing schools. The school is performing where it's predicted to be performed based off the economically disadvantaged percentage. If it's below the line, they're performing below where the prediction is based on their economically disadvantaged percentage. And if it is above the line, the school is performing where it is predicted to, performing above where it's predicted to perform. In the chart that you see here, this is our Type 5 charter schools located in EBR. The first is Hillworth, with a 92.03% of economically disadvantaged students. The second dot is Linear at 95.9%. The third is Dalton at 98.37%. And lastly, we have Democracy Prep, who serves 100% of students with economically disadvantaged. This slide takes into consideration elementary schools alongside EBR elementary schools. This is removing selective admission or in magnets. The yellow dot, you can see it, is Linear, orange is Dalton, and green is Democracy Prep. EBR, traditional public elementary schools, inclusive of their charters as well, serve a population of at least 40.98% of economically disadvantaged percentage of students. Our Type 5 charters serve at least 92% of economically disadvantaged students. Specifically focused on middle schools, again, non-selective admission and no magnets. Here you will see this is Kenilworth of the yellow dot. EBR middle schools are at least 48.6% economically disadvantaged, and our Type 5 charter school that serves as a middle school population is 92% economically disadvantaged. organizational implications. As we know, here in Louisiana, there are several types of charter schools that are authorized in Louisiana, type 1, 2, 3, 3B, 4, and 5. Our type 5 charter schools, however, that is transferred from the recovery school district shall be converted to a type 3B charter school. A type 3B means a former type 5 charter school. So once our type 5s would move back to the local authority of EBR, they would become considered a type 3B charter school. There are specific permissions that are provided to type 3B charter schools, and they are as follows. One is the facility. The local school board shall permit a type 3B charter school to remain in the facility in which it was located at the time of transfer, or shall provide the type B charter school with another facility for use. Related to enrollment, expulsion, and transportation, the state board may require a type 3B charter school to participate in a unified process common to other public schools located in that same parish or school district boundaries that are critical to providing equity and access to students and families, such as process for student enrollment, expulsion, and transportation. And lastly, LEA status. A type 5 charter school should have the option to remain its own local education agency for funding purposes and statutory definitions upon conversion to a type 3B charter school. So meaning when those type 5 charter schools transition back to the local control of, or the local authorization of EBR, at that time they will be recognized as a type 3B charter school. As a type 3B charter school, they can select to remain their own LEA or to opt in to being within EBR's LEA. But that choice is on the school to make that. Next is the fiscal impact. And these calculations are based on just the current enrollment and subject to change. However, this is just a representation of the 2% administration fee that we currently collect from the RSD schools, and this would then upon sending these schools to the jurisdiction of EBR would then transition to EBR. The timeline, as you can see laid out, we are here in April providing this report to you and proposing that in June being able to bring back to you the next steps so that BESE is able to then move forward with moving these schools back to the administration and management of East Baton Rouge Parish by stipulating the conditions and stipulations for BESE action. And that concludes it.
Thank you, Dr. Peters. Any questions or comments from members of the board? Mr. Garber.
Yes. It's my understanding that...
Turn your mic towards you, Mr. Garber.
I'm sorry. Okay. Is that better?
Yes.
There we go. That we are doing this a little bit sooner than the law requires us to do. That is, we are looking into sending these schools back a couple of years earlier than what the law normally requires us to do. Or we're addressing the issue earlier.
Yeah, we're bringing the status update to you earlier than we have to based on the statutory requirements of, I believe, not till September. However, we know that those schools need to know to be able to plan. As stated, as a type 3B charter schools, those schools have the option to remain their own LEA or to opt into the EBR LEA. When we think about the things that they would need to then make determinations on, a lot of that has to do with their organizational structure, the way in which they structure their budget, and any financial and fiscal implications. So we want to make sure we also provide the runway for schools to do what they need to do in terms of making those decisions.
And so we're bringing it early, and if this looks like it is not going to be in the best interest of all parties, the department could recommend that the schools just stay in RSD for another 4 or 5 years.
Well,
Technically speaking.
yes, sir, that is a decision we would have to make. Our hope is that we can have some form of reunification here through a process where both sides are agreeable.
I agree, and I think that would be the best route for everyone to take. I was just wondering if the East Baton Rouge Parish School Board understands that one option we have is to just retain these schools for another 4 or 5 years.
Yes, we
Can you
provide,
explain that? Okay.
we provided them with outlines of what the statutory, all of the statutes provide.
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, thank
Madam
you.
President?
Mr. Castillo, thank you. Is it possible for one school to choose to opt in as a 3B and 4 say, well, I'm not?
So they all will become a type 3B. It is possible that they determine then if they want to remain their own LEA or to opt into the EBR LEA. So that is possible that you may have one school that says, I want to be my own LEA, and the rest say that they want to be an EBR's LEA. That's
But
possible.
could you have one of those, or 2 schools, not wanting either of those 3, the 3 or 3B, and remain in the RSD? Like, I don't want part of EBR at all.
I would ask legal to provide that language of the statute. I moonlight as an attorney, I'm not really one, so.
So basically, you're saying, we're going
So,
to mandate.
just to be clear, so the question is, as a matter of law, when a type 5 returns to the local district, does it become a 3B or not, or does it have an option to become a 3B? Is that the first question? Just want to make sure.
Or remain. Yeah, where you have 5 schools, it could all.
Yes.
Right. No, they do not have an option. When the school is returned, they automatically become a 3B as operation of law. They don't have the choice to remain a type 5.
Right, I'm correct, I understand that, but you have 5 schools. If one decides, I don't want to be a part of EBR, I want to remain as a
As a
5.
No, it doesn't work like that.
Okay.
If the
So
department
you're
decides,
basically saying you will mandate? I'm using that word.
the law provides mandate, I don't know if that's the right term to
No.
use, but it's more of a unification.
You're recommending that all 5
Yes.
become a 3B.
Yes, when they return to the local district, they do become 3B.
Yeah, also, Madam President, I don't know if this is the answer to your question, but they all have the opportunity to think through if they want to join the LEA of EBR or not. So that is an opportunity that they have to make that decision once they return as a 3B.
And maybe I'll ask as a follow-up question then, in terms of who determines whether they return to the local district to become a 3B, that's within the province of this board, correct?
That is correct.
Dr. Davis.
Just a clarification question. Is Redesign actually Celerity, but just with a name change because of the scandal, or is that an entirely new operator?
I would actually ask Dr. Beck to provide more context to Celerity versus Redesign, and she's here.
Good afternoon, Dr. Davis. I appreciate your comment.
Turn your microphone on, Dr. Coe, and introduce yourself, please.
I am Dr. Angela Beck, with Redesigned Schools and Superintendent. I've been superintendent for a couple of years now.
You sure your microphone's on, Dr. Beck?
Take your mask off. There you go.
My name is Dr. Angela Beck. I am with Redesigned Schools, Louisiana. I've been superintendent for the last couple of years. In regards to name change, we were Celerity before, that is accurate. We were in no part of anything that happened in California. That's totally a separate division or entity. I think with the vision and what we were trying to accomplish here in Louisiana with our students, actually our school names are by the actual building names specifically, like Dalton Elementary or Lanier Elementary, or going to honor the communities that we serve, because our schools are, a fixture in the community. So Redesign is something on the back end that we use to refer to our CMO name, but just to acknowledge we had nothing to do with whatever happened in, California.
I didn't know that, yep, but I didn't know if like your length of contracts changed and how that worked, if that it was really just a name change rather than
Yeah, it was-
reauthorizing everything.
It was,
Okay, that's
yeah,
enough.
okay, thank you, I appreciate that.
Great. Any other questions or comments from members of the board? I have Ms. Orange.
If you might stay for a second, my question, I actually have a question too. So just a question about, so there's 3 schools, right? And there's a range of performance from what I understand. Can you speak a little bit to that? So what is actually happening at Lanier? That seems really promising. What's happening at Lanier that we could be learning from? How does it apply to what's going on at the other 2 campuses?
Yeah, so Lanier, and that, we just actually had LBOE come visit our schools. And when you come to our schools, we have obviously the same curriculum. It's funny because you can walk into one 4th grade classroom at one school and then walk into the 4th grade classroom at the other. So we collaborate a lot between the schools. I think where there's a little bit of a difference is, I like to refer to it, and I love this name change with the division with equity, right? Because I think sometimes where students start at the start line are how far behind the start line. And that's how I like to refer to it a little bit. All students are capable of moving, and if you notice at Delta, we have always been A or B in student progress there. We have been working very hard to get the start line, get our kids to the start line, right? Get them on grade level. I think with Lanier, we were able to catch them up. We have a lot of, our teachers are very seasoned there too, and we have spread the wealth between the schools. But I would say kids coming to Lanier are maybe a little closer to the starting line than our kids that are in 70805. And we are working just as diligently at those schools. We work very closely with LBOE. I make no excuses about it. It is all about student achievement for us and moving our students. And I would like for all our kids to be on grade level. We are going to dump in a lot of work into literacy this next year with the blessing of the ESSER funds, so I appreciate your guidance with the ESSER funds in that regard. But I think once we shore up those gaps in K through 2 specifically, that we will be able to have schools on the same levels because they will enter 3rd grade on grade level. In regards to, we had a school prior, Crestworth, and we were able to take that school as well and move them to a C. So we have history in Louisiana of being able to take schools that were traditionally Fs, for a significant amount of time and move them to a C grade level. But again, I think it's dependent on the student and how they come into us and how much effort. But we're working just as hard at all 3 of our schools, and I'm not going to give an excuse about where we're at, but I can only tell you we're going to continue to work hard.
I appreciate that. I do have a follow-up, and this may be more directed at the department or, what's interesting to me when I look across each of these schools is the almost 2 different narratives. There's a progress narrative, a growth narrative that seems to be very favorable. In every case, I'm mistaken if I believe it's every case, an A or a B in progress, or 100 points progress index, which indicates that the school itself, the teacher, the degree to which that unit is having an impact on growth on that child or those set of children. And then there's the actual SPS, or the letter grade, which I think Dr. Peterson, you spoke to this at the beginning of your presentation, in some ways provides a starting point that is directly correlative with socioeconomic status. So my question to you is, how many years would a school have to get an A or a B in growth, proving that, in fact, the students are being impacted positively by the teachers before that school would be on a path to be a higher letter grade, which is reflective of the growth portion of the impact of what a teacher had on the child. I'm just kind of curious, since from many of these examples, there have been many, many years of growth every year, and yet the score is still a D. Can someone tell me something?
Yeah, I was hopeful that was a rhetorical question. We'd have to get a psychometrician or an attorney from Adams and Reeves. One of the other to answer that. I don't know. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, from a leader perspective, that I might be good to help, but growth is a smaller portion. We actually are actively talking about that in accountability commission right now because school, if we're, 46% third grade, not meeting the standard, right? The need of the state as a whole at this point is to get kids to move forward, right? And I think with the movement forward, that celebration comes with progress, right? As of right now, you can move a kid from unsatisfactory to approaching basic. One would say that's a success of that teacher, right? Because they were able to move a kid a whole band level. In essence, if you look at it in the STS calculator with 150 points for student progress, but it goes in as a 0 in the calculator for that kid's whites. So when you average it all out, that kid is still an F. I think they're around a 39 to be exact. So it's very hard for schools where kids are starting behind the start line. Does that make sense? And we're making growth progress, A or B, I consider is great, right? That unfortunately the calculator at the very end doesn't acknowledge that growth. So a school can look like a failure, but actually might be doing the hard work and moving kids forward so they can meet those grade level standards in the future and catch up those gaps. And I think we're going to need to look at that a little bit deeper because of the pandemic. In essence, with kids being, learning that virtual or possibly, not getting the format that they necessarily need to be successful. This is something that unfortunately may have to come to the forefront for BESE to start taking a look at a little bit more.
I appreciate you speaking to that. I do have one more question for Chairman.
Yes.
It's actually a comment, it isn't a question, but I do want to just recognize your leadership, Dr. Peterson. Someone who's been sitting here a while, we've seen the sort of saga and the evolution of the negotiations between the RSD and the school district, although leadership has changed over the years, and I know that is just a really challenging set of negotiations as we sort of figure out what the best path back is. So you're doing the Lord's work. Thank you for your leadership, and it sounds like you all are optimistic that we're starting to reach some resolve. Is that the right assumption?
Great, thank you, Ms. Armstrong. Dr. Davis.
I'd also like to say that I greatly appreciated the Accountability Commission's discussion of growth, and it's very exciting to see us addressing what I think is a big flaw in our system, which is not accounting for growth enough in the structure of our accountability system. I have a question just about the Type 5, the move from Type 5 to 3B. I know that when Patrick Gilbard was in charge of the Baton Rouge Achievement Zone, he had an ambitious goal of raising an additional $30 million so that the kids in that area could have a transformative educational experience. And so my question is, are there pots of money that these schools would lose access to in their transition from a Type 5 to a 3B? Does anybody know the answer to that? Like, are there any grants or anything that they're eligible for, either from DOE or even from the feds, that would be lost if they moved back to EBR?
I'm not sure if that is in here, but in terms of with the L, it's more so around whether or not they choose to be in EBR's LEA or remain their own. By currently, they operate as a Type 5, they are their own LEA. If they remain, transition into the district, Type 3B, and remain their own LEA, things are the same, money is flowing directly to them. They're opting into EBR's LEA, and that money will flow from EBR to them. And so at that point, it just depends on how EBR, and I think that's something that the schools are working with EBR to better understand what that allocation would look like.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions, comments from the board? Seeing none, we have some comment cards. First up, we have Mr. Michael Godin, who would like to provide information only. And then I'll just say next up, Ms. Caroline Romer, who supports the recommendation, wishes to speak. And then after that, Ms. Sarah Vandergrift, who also supports the recommendation and wishes to speak. Sarah waves, and Caroline is approaching the front of the room. Mr. Godet.
Thank you, Chairman Castile and President Holloway and all the board members. As Dr. Brumley stated earlier, this has been a long trek. And I think I even outlast him in the journey that's been taken, because I started this process back with another superintendent at the state level many years ago before COVID, and with a different Peterson sitting in the chair working with this. So this has been something that's taken a very long time, and I appreciate and applaud the efforts of this board to try to do this. And I want to reiterate very clearly that I am speaking as myself. I am not speaking as a representative of the board or making any things like that to speak for the board. This is just me speaking. But I also want to make sure it's noted that we in EBR have spent a lot of time and effort codifying and bringing out a lot of the ambiguity and things around the applications of charter school law within our district, and how we rate charters and how we grant renewals and all of these sorts of things. When I first got on the board, every charter school had a different contract. There was no written rules about how things would be done. There was really, in my opinion, no accountability to the charter. So I think we've done a very good job within our district of pulling those things together and making a clear, comprehensive charter pack that every charter school that we have has signed on to and abides by, and gives us the ability for both oversight, but it also gives the charter school clear guidance on exactly how they will be judged and held accountable for their actions. So that's something I'm very proud about. We also have a very new, energetic, new superintendent who sometimes I have trouble keeping up with. He's running in so many circles. But we are excited about trying to take on this task. We'd like to have these schools back in the family and appreciate all the work that you're doing. And I'm not trying to negotiate in any way, because I know those will come down. But the only thing that I saw looking through the specifications in here was the fact that it would require us to automatically grant a 3-year extension in July 1st of 2022. That is a time of renewal, and I think it would be appropriate for BESE to go on record, because that would be when they would be making their renewal, for BESE to go on record saying whether or not they would renew this charter according to the BESE rules. I just think you have rules, you have ways to go about deciding whether or not you were going to renew. And if they were going to remain a top 5 charter, would you renew them? And so give us some clear guidance on that. And that's my only comment. But again, that's me speaking, and that's not the board speaking or our attorney speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Godet, and thank you for your service as president of the EBR School Board for 2 long years. I know they were probably felt like 10 years, but thank you for your service nonetheless.
Thanks, Mr. Castillo. Could I ask Mr. Godet?
Yes, Mr. Morris.
Yes.
Mr. Godet, appreciate your testimony today. I thought that Dr. Davis made one point earlier when she expressed a concern about funding and what this potential move could impact the balance at the schools. And the response was that if they did make the decision that EBR would be the OEA, the EBR would provide certain services to those schools, and the cash flow would go through EBR, through the services to the school. Do you know if the board has provided each of these schools a list of the services that EBR would provide, and some cost estimation associated with each one?
I will be clear, not speaking for the board, I do not know. I know that we work with all of our we have 10+ charters that we work with. The allocation from local tax dollars and MFP money would be the same. My understanding, and again, I am not an expert, I try not to delve into the details of all of the issues, but my belief is it's really around federal funds and IDEA funds, and that sort of funnel of how it comes through the system. And so that's something that can be worked out. Right now, EBR, where we are, they're getting their money. So I think that mutually we can work that out. But again, I'm speaking for myself. I'm not trying to do that. I do not think it would have any major impact on the funding, but I'm not an expert. Thank you, sir.
Great. Any other questions for Mr. Godin? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And I apologize for running. I have a grandkid parking lot.
Certainly understand. Thank you, sir. Ms. Romer.
Good afternoon, Caroline Romer, Executive Director of the Louisiana Association of Public Charter Schools. Let me start by echoing the thank yous that have been said. Dr. Peterson has maybe sadly had to sit up with us over the last year as we've talked through and worked with EDR on this. Also, thank you to EDR. They have had several meetings with the Type 5s as we've, again, talked about this reunification. Change in leadership always makes it a challenge, but I know that Dr. Narcisse met as early as, I think, yesterday for the first time with some of the 5s, so we do know that conversations are taking place. That is good news. The bad news is we do continue to seem to get stuck on this LEA status piece, so I appreciate the clarification that the LEA status is a choice made by the charter operator and not something negotiated per se by the authorizers in this. That is a choice of the operator. It's a big decision. As already has been explained, how those monies flow to these schools really matter, and most importantly around the federal dollars. I think it becomes even more important as we move into seeing the stimulus or COVID ESSER monies coming through. That's millions of dollars that again could flow to the district, which then allows the district to carve off administrative fees, and as well as not always allocate the same way it would have been allocated to the charter if they were their own LEA. So it matters. I expect that that will be the major negotiation here, but we believe we can get through it. I would also say to the renewal piece, it's something to consider. We've talked about growth, and while EDR has recently created charter policies that did not exist over the last 20 years, and we're thankful for it, their policy differs from the BESE policy and does not include any growth being factored into their renewals. So we think that's a big piece, and we would love to speak to the board members and the administration of the EDR potentially changing that policy. But again, we're committed to the conversation. The Recovery School District law was not created with the intention that a school sit inside the Recovery School District forever. We've been through this already in New Orleans and set milestones and goals and timelines that were able to be followed with lots of input and conversation. And fast forward, that district is now a whole again with charters working with the district. So we hope to be part of the family, as Mr. Gode said, for EDR, but there's still some major decisions to be made, and we do appreciate being given the time to consider some of these major transitions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Romer. Dr. Davis.
Just one clarifying question. I want to make sure, this is from Dr. Peterson, our conversation. So they come back as a 3B and they remain their own LEA. They own their own accountability score, or is their accountability score incorporated into the district accountability score at the end of the day?
Yeah, so they still are under the authorization of EDR, which means that accountability, they are part of that system, and so that would be part of them, partly ours, absolutely EDR.
So even though they're coming back as a 3B and their own LEA, which substantially limits the ability of the East Baton Rouge Parish School Board to govern what's going on inside of them, the district is then still accountable, or takes or absorbs their accountability score into the district score?
Yes, I think this is a great question, because I think this is a point of clarification to understand what it actually means to be your own independent LEA and still have an authorizer. So even with them being their own independent LEA, if you think about that in terms of like the way in which funding flows. However, EDR's policies and authored in charter framework and charter policies still apply to that school, even regardless if they're their own LEA or part of EDR's LEA. They're still a charter school authorized within that. So they still have essentially their performance framework that they have for their type 1s, that's still applicable to those schools, whether they choose to be any EDR's LEA or to remain their own independent LEA.
Seeing no other questions, the motion on the floor is a motion to receive the report. Is there any objection to that motion to receive the report? I see no objections. That motion passes. Mr. Morris?
Yeah, Mr. Castillo, I'd like to bring another motion to the board. I believe that now that we've accepted the previous motion regarding the charter school report, I'll make a motion that we further direct the LDE to recommend for consideration the June 2021 BESE meeting stipulations and conditions for the return of the remaining 5 Type 5 charter schools located in EBR to the EBR area school system.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second to that motion? There's a second by Dr. Weaver. Any comments? Any objections to that motion? Seeing no objections, that motion passes. Our next item.
The next item is on page 10, item 4.1, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 1566, pupil progression policies and procedures regarding pupil progression plan addendums. The updated department recommendation is to delete the item from the school innovation and turnaround agenda.
Is there a motion? Moved by Mrs. Morris, seconded by Mr. Rock. Any objection to the motion to delete? There's one comment part for the record. Ms. Sarah Vandergriff supports the recommendation but does not wish to speak. Any objections? Seeing none, motion passes. Then that takes us to the end of our agenda. We are adjourned.